Hi beautiful souls, it's Tan here today with another astrology video for you, and we're talking about Venus today because I'm gonna start a new series on the Venus signs and Venus house placements in synastry. So it's gonna be a whole Venus month or 2 months because it is also Taurus season's coming up and Taurus is ruled by Venus. I want to tell you the story of Venus first, okay, before we go into what she actually does in astrology, because the story is really important for us to get a holistic understanding of her role in our natal chart. Venus is the Roman name for the goddess Aphrodite, who is the Greek name, so there's just like two names going on here. So two gods, Kronos and Uranus, were at a war with each other, okay, to gain supreme power in the kingdom, and so they were fighting, and Kronos managed to sever Uranus's testicles, and so his testicles fell into the ocean, and there was blood everywhere, and out of this blood and sperm and the foam in the water, three ingredients that makes Venus, comes Venus. So she was born from these three things: blood, semen, and foam. This is important, right? I'll tell you later on why these three things are really important in the birth of Venus. So Venus was born, and of course the mortals that watched her emerge from the water saw how beautiful she was, because she had a very good balance of curvaceousness and non-curvaceousness in her body. She also had a very symmetrical face. So that's the idea of beauty when we're coming to talk about Venus. The harmony of the way that she looked was just perfect harmony, and when she started walking, the flowers started blooming around her, and she had a very kind of indulgent nature. You know, she loved all the good things in life. She loved food and touch and nice smelling things, and she also, you know, loved art and music. Okay, so this was Venus. She was then, and then there's this scene which I can't actually remember what happened, but she was in front of all the gods and she kind of stripped in front of them to reveal her whole body, and everybody was mesmerized by her beauty. Okay, and eventually her father decided to let her marry the god Vulcan. So she was married to the goddess Vulcan in Roman, and in Greece his name was Hephaestus. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but yeah, we're just gonna call him Vulcan. So Vulcan was the god of fire, and he was also a blacksmith, but she was arranged to be married to him, so there was really no love there to start with, but he was also crippled, and he was considered to be ugly and just not very good looking and a little bit scary, things like that. So Venus was kind of and he was not nice to Venus in the marriage. He was cold. So she was very unhappy in this marriage. And one day she heard about this really handsome, good looking, and athletic looking soldier, and his name was Ares, or Mars in Roman mythology. He was the god of war. And then she kind of felt very attracted to this god. But you know, Ares, or Mars, we'll just call him Mars in this video. So Mars was not really well liked by a lot of people for his aggression and his rudeness and things like that. So one day he came back home from war, and you know, he was like expecting a nice welcome home for him, but as it turns out, nobody really welcomed him except for Venus, who was there. She was just overcome by her desire for this man because he had something that her husband did not have at all. So what'd she do? They got together, and there was a bit of cheating going on here. He would creep into her bed and they would make love when Vulcan wasn't there. And until one day, Vulcan caught them in the act. So he decided to file for a divorce. I'm talking about it like they go to court and stuff, but I don't know. He filed for a divorce with Venus. And so Venus is now with Mars. And they had some children together, and one of them is Eros. One of their children was Eros. But didn't quite end there, because Venus didn't have just Mars as her other lover. She had a whole bunch of lovers. She allowed her desire for pleasure, okay, to rule everything else, So even when she was with Ares, she fell in love with a mortal boy, and his name was Adonis, and there was a bunch of other lovers. Even Hermes was also one of her lovers. Okay, so now let's talk about Venus in astrology. So if we look back at the story, the way that she was born, how she came out of blood, semen, and foam. Blood being, the life-giving force of our body, right? Semen being the part of our body that reproduces and, gives birth. Doesn't give birth, but you know what I mean. And foam of the water being nature. So this really tells us that she is very fertile, okay? She represents fertility. The ability to, take nature and the human body and reproductive systems together. This is true fertility, right, guys? She was born from, the severing of the testicles of Uranus. She's considered to be the harmony that can come from violence, the peace that can come from violence. And the way that, when she started walking and the flowers started blooming around her, coupled with the fact that she was born from the sea foam, really tells us that real beauty, true beauty, is one of simplicity, is one that we can find in nature, but it's in the essence of nature that we find true beauty. Like when you look at a flower, why do we like to look at a flower? Why does everybody like to look at a flower? It's because, there's a sense of purity and a sense of, there's an essence within the flower that comes out through the colors, through the shapes of the flower. But it's really an essence from inside the flower. And it's an essence of a simple, authentic, pure, fertile, springtime freshness. All right? That is the beauty that we are talking about with Miss Venus. So with her, very balanced face and very symmetrical facial features, she is considered to be the epitome of femininity. She's the real femininity, not like Neptune, who's more like an ideal version, but she's real. She's the real concrete idea of femininity that we can see and touch and feel. Oh, I forgot to tell you one important thing in the story of Venus is that she has this girdle, okay? It's a golden girdle which she puts around her waist, and she gives this to mortals to make them fall in love with each other. So this tells us that she's also a giver of love. She gives a lot. She gives of love and pleasure. And yes, of course, because she's into art and music and all things that's pleasurable and sensual, she's very seductive, so all these things are a part of Venus. Now, what happens when Venus goes bad? Venus was unhappy in her marriage, right, to Vulcan. But Venus gone bad does not face confrontations. She did not face confrontation with Vulcan. Venus gone bad gives in to pleasure and desire rather than having to confront problems and situations, because that's more of like a Martian energy, right? To have to go through the unpleasantness of conflict with somebody else, having to, practically fix situations. She would rather give in to whatever pleasure she had left in her. And an overdoing of Venus causes a lot of indulgence in luxury, a lot of overspending of money. And that commitment that is supposed to be the good side of Venus, okay, is hard to manage. Like how in the story, her commitment to Vulcan was It's not much of a commitment. And she's just given in to all her pleasures, and so she went with Mars and all of her other lovers. So, Venus is desire, and desire is when you want something so badly, right? And it almost feels like sometimes you just don't know why you want it, but you want it because it actually makes you feel good. That is the desire nature in all of us. It's not about power, it's not about anything practical, it just makes us feel good. So Venus is the desire, which can go positive or negative. Desire because we want something just because it feels so good to have. Now, in the story of Venus, the fact that she, you know, was having all of these other lovers to please her desire, and the fact that she couldn't keep her commitment with Vulcan, is really showing us that her sense of value goes haywire, because Venus also has to do with values. So her sense of value, okay, and self-worth, if Venus is in a negative aspect of Venus, goes haywire. You know, if she had really valued herself and she had a lot of self-worth, right, what she would have done is she would have had a respect for herself and not allowed her reputation to become as such. And she would respect the person that she's being committed to. The positive side of Venus is the ability to maintain harmony. It's the ability to see beauty in everyone and give off love and give off beauty. Maintain commitment and relationships in the right way. So I just want to mention a little bit that Venus in astrology represents all of those things in Venus in your chart, sign, house placements, and there is no good or bad Venus sign or house placements. Of course, you know, Venus is, of course, you know, rules Taurus and Libra, and it's exalted in Pisces. You know, there's a reason why they say all of these things, but you know, whether someone's Venus is doing good or bad in their chart is actually going to depend on aspects. Venus in harsh aspects, challenging aspects to other planets, is going to make all of these things that we just talked about more challenging for the natal chart holder. Venus in a positive aspect or in an easier aspect can make all of these things show up in their life in an easier way. Also, Venus represents kind of different things for men and women. I mean, there's some overlaps, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences in that in women, Venus represents how she projects her feminine side onto the world and how she uses her feminine side to seduce or attract other people to her. Venus doesn't go around chasing after people. Venus sits there, uses her seduction techniques, her feminine side, to attract people to her. That's what a woman is doing with Venus in her chart. It's also like her style, you know, how she wants to dress and do her hair, and how she wants her, you know, the feminine side. Dressing up is a feminine thing, right? Of course, I'm not saying men don't dress up, but traditionally, you know, dressing up is considered a more feminine thing. So the way that a woman's going to dress up is going to be shown through her Venus sign placement. For men, on the other hand, Venus is going to show his feminine side, which he has a feminine side, and it's going to also show the kind of women that he would be attracted to when the woman is doing her work of trying to seduce and trying to attract. That's the attraction factor for him. What's going to draw him to that? What's going to bring out his Martian side? The things that he desires to meet with his Martian nature so he can go out after that woman. And the last thing I want to say is that for both men and women, Venus represents the relationship style. The style of the relationship that you like to have, that you just have when you're in a relationship. This does not represent how you meet somebody, or it doesn't represent the things that you do within the relationship, because that would depend on house placements, because your Venus will be a certain house and certain sign. When we're talking about the sign, we are talking about the style of your relationship. It's like your love style. if that makes any sense. It's your love style, and it's the style of the sensual experiences that you like. It's not what it is, that would be the house placement, but it's the style of how you go about getting sensual experiences and how you want those sensual experiences to come to you. Okay? So, and also your Venus sign can't really be two signs, cannot be more than 2 signs away from your sun sign, because Venus doesn't move so far from the sun. So for example, if you have a sun sign in Cancer, right, you'll either have your Venus in Cancer, or you can have your Venus in Gemini, or your Venus in Taurus. Those are 2 signs away from Cancer. Or you can have your Venus in Leo or your Venus in Virgo, because it's going the other way. That's also 2 signs from Cancer. So there's, for one sun sign, there's 5 possible Venus signs that can go with that sun sign. So the Venus sign is going to be modified a little bit by the sun sign, and the sun sign will be modified by the Venus sign for the woman. For both men and women, their Venus sign can be modified by their sun sign a little bit. Okay, so there's that, and the Venus signs can be modified by the house placements and the aspects that they're making to planets. Yes, I think that's all I have to say about Venus. I feel like I'm going on here for a while. So, stay tuned for the Venus series, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below if you haven't. If you have, then thank you very much for coming along with me on these astrology growth journeys where we're growing and learning together. I'll see you very soon, guys. Bye.